Hey guys, it's me Astrid, and today I want to show you how to rescue an orchid in the way that I would go about rescuing an orchid. I saw this orchid in the Fred Meyer that had been there like since a week and a half ago. It's been there a while. And I said, oh, I don't know, and I keep smelling it every time I go back to the Fred Meyer. I keep smelling it, and it smells very good. But it had yellow flowers, it cost $17. I'm thinking, I'll find something else someday. However, I just keep being drawn to this smell. So I went to another Fred Meyer and I found the exact same orchid, except it looks like this. However, the thing that really was making me want to buy this is that even the flowers are basically totally dead, crunchy even. Can you hear that? These flowers still have the fragrance in them. And the fragrance, I realized, was just like ethyl vanillin, which is a chemical compound I worked with in lab, and I recognize that smell anywhere I go. Ethyl vanillin. It's kind of a honey, sweet, sugary, vanilla, lovely sweet aroma. Oh god, I have to get it. And then I went to the counter. I said, will you guys sell this for a discount? It's looking pretty gross. And they said, you know, usually we'll just send it back to the company and they'll give us a full refund for any dead plants, but we can give you like 25% off. So I wound up paying about $12 for this orchid, and you know, that's not too bad. It's a little bit bad. I would rather pay $5 for something in this shape, but whatevs, we'll fix it. We'll make a video about it. It's great. So let's talk about why I picked this orchid, and instead of saying that's too bad, I'm going to let it go. Let's look at the things that look very bad about it. Number one, this pseudobulb is looking like a nightmare. It's like split open and revealing another layer of pseudobulb under the first layer. It's like a horrible onion nightmare. You can see it's like ripped on this side too. That looks pretty bad, right? It's very shriveled, very wrinkled, very dehydrated. Another thing, the flower spike doesn't look good. And lastly, this leaf also is looking kind of bad. Now let's talk about why I decided to pick this orchid instead of just passing it by because it's kind of in bad shape. Now, the brown soft rot, I think that's what it's called, is caused by some bacteria. That will kill your orchid in a few weeks or a few days even, and it starts from the base of the pseudobulb and comes up. In my experience, anyway. And I said, okay, so this leaf infection actually is coming from the tip of the leaf down. That's an easy fix. We cut it, we disinfect, it's going to be fine. Now, you may say, okay, well, what about the flowers? They're horrible. Simple. Cut the flower spike. No problem. And lastly, you may say, what about this pseudobulb? What about this really bad pseudobulb? Doesn't it have a disease? Isn't there something wrong? This is horrible. Well, it is very wrinkled. It is very dehydrated. My hypothesis here is that it got so fat with water at one point that it split a little bit, and then it was so dehydrated that that split shrunk down and it just looks like an exploded head or some horrible thing. However, I think this pseudobulb might be okay, and that's why I took a chance on it. It might be okay, and the last thing that's very encouraging to me is these new growths. They're bursting with little new white roots. This is a perfect time to repot when new roots are coming out, and it has 1, 2, and this very tiny third baby growth. That tells me this might bloom within the year. So, with all that said and done, I'm gonna repot this and show you how I take care of this orchid, and I'll be back with you in a second, just 1 second. Okay, so what I did first was I wet this orchid. Now, what I'm going to do is, before I start digging at this stuff, is I'm going to sterilize my scissors. Now, I don't actually like this 99% alcohol. It feels kind of weird when I use it, but you just need to use some kind of alcohol to sterilize your scissors. Additionally, and I've written a paper on this, to effectively kill bacteria and other ickies, you need to rub the scissor blades for 15 seconds. Okay, so now that we're done sterilizing the scissors, let's take out this stake from the plant, and naturally we're going to snap the flower spike. That just snapped right off. but I'm going to cut it with these sterile scissors. And I'm going to re-sterilize my scissors after cutting on this plant because I can't be 100% sure that it doesn't have a disease. So, flower spike, gone. Now, next thing I'm going to do is pull this guy out of the pot. If it's stuck in the pot, you can squeeze the sides. Just squeeze and twist and twist. Eventually it will come out, I promise. Sometimes maybe you'll get a pair of clippers and clip the side of the pot if the plant is really stuck to it, but you don't have to. And I'm going to throw this pot away because I hate dark pots. Alright, so to start this, what I do is I pinch and pinch and I just start digging like this. And you can find where the roots go. You just pull them up, follow the path they're on. And when they're wet, they're going to be more flexible, which is why I wet this plant first. However, I'm pretty sure most of these roots are dead. But you're just going to start doing this. And also I like to just rub the bottom in circles. It helps this media to come out. Orchids are often potted in something called Pro Mix. Pro Mix is apparently good for growing orchids, but a lot of home growers don't know how to deal with it, much like sphagnum moss for growing orchids. And I prefer bark media for most of my orchids, but I'm starting to like sphagnum moss in certain situations. So you probably won't ever want to use Pro Mix in your home setting. However, it's not too inherently evil, and you're just going to want to get that out of the plant. So I'm going to continue picking and picking. And alright, so we're making some more progress. Now just keep kind of pulling the roots around the sides, and don't panic if you break a few roots, especially with an orchid like this. Try to avoid it, but don't panic because it's impossible to really untangle this without breaking some roots. Additionally, we can see why this pseudobulb is so extremely shriveled up. When I am digging this media out, even though I just wet the plant, this is totally dry, bone dry. That's why this is dehydrated, just like I thought. So that's what. And also here we're about to find the sphagnum moss ball. There's this little ball of sphagnum moss in the middle. Now nurseries do this probably because they have a seedling growing in sphagnum moss and they put that seedling into the next media without taking it out of the sphagnum moss because it would be time ineffective to like perfectly depot every orchid and repot it. So what I believe they do is they just leave that sphagnum moss there and they pot it in the next size. And then when they have to pot to an even bigger size, they don't even undo the root ball. They just put it in a bigger pot and put dirt around it. Okay guys, so now we have basically everything cleared out of here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go wet the roots because all this media is completely dry. Okay, so now these roots have been wet and sort of some dirt rinsed off of them. Now I'm just going to pull around and see which roots are pulling off easily and which ones. Let's see, do we have any ones that, here we go, one sliding right off. You see that? So I'm just going to find this root and see how hollow it is, and I'm going to see how this goes all the way back and it's just pulling. I'm going to cut as close to the base as I can, and I'm going to cut it out. And again, this one's just pulling off like that. So I'm going to go in and cut, and I'm going to take that one out. So basically any ones that are doing this pulling apart and feeling papery and mushy, we're going to cut out. So additionally here, I'm going to take this tiny old pseudobulb out. It probably has a lot of dead roots mixed in here, and it's probably not doing much to support the plant. It's so small. Additionally, when I pot this, I want to pot it upright, and this pseudobulb is going to hang out probably under the media and get rotten potentially. So I'm going to twist it off, and I'll show you how to do this. It's very shriveled and bad, so let's just twist, and off it came. And of course the roots attached to it are dead and bad. Normally you don't want to take off pseudobulbs unless they're like very dead and brown or something, or have an infection. But this one was just so small and little that I wanted to take it off. Okay guys, so here you have it, the finished product. Now this orchid had a lot more healthy roots than I had expected. I'm kind of surprised and not surprised, because really the only big problem with this orchid is the slightly sick leaf here and the shriveled pseudobulb, and that was due very obviously to very dehydrated media and probably not being watered for a long time. But these roots, for the most part, were all firm and still viable. It's just a testament to how resilient orchids can be. So what I like to do is to cut it with a nice shape, but since this infection or whatever it is has gotten so far down the leaf, I'm just going to cut it kind of along, see, along this little pattern here, so at least it looks kind of somewhat natural. When you have something like this, you need to cut a lot deeper down than the infection. You don't want to just cut, 1 millimeter away from this. So I did that. I cut substantially lower than the infection. And now I've got some cinnamon, which I have yet to figure out like a graceful way of applying. So I just put it on this, and I'm gonna dip that just on the leaf. So what cinnamon does is that it helps to dry out wounds on the plant, and it supposedly has some antibacterial and antifungal properties. Now, you may be tempted to say, oh, well, shouldn't I put cinnamon on the roots that I cut? No, unless maybe you cut like this root and you just put a little dab. Otherwise, don't put cinnamon on the roots because it will block them from absorbing water and they will die. I made that mistake with a phalaenopsis the first time around. So you can see we've got this little border of cinnamon here. That's good. So what we have to do really quickly before we repot is I'm going to disinfect it. Now I've run out of hydrogen peroxide, so I'm going to use a more harsh disinfectant, and I'm going to have to wash my hands after I do this, but what I'm going to do is put it in this bag because I live in a small room and I don't have many options. And I'm going to spray it with an insecticide, fungicide, miticide spray. Gosh, this is almost as big as this garbage bag. And what that's going to do is if there's any bugs or anything on it, it will kill it. It takes care of a lot of little nasties, and it keeps it from getting fungal infection, which is good too. So I'm just gonna spray it on the roots and up over the leaves of the plant. Okay, so what am I going to put in this potting media? Well, in the center, I may put a packing peanut or two just to keep it from being super wet. Also, this is a potting mix called Better Grow. It's special orchid mix. This one is chunkier, but it's available at Lowe's. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's actually not bad for repotting orchids. I'm surprised that a prepackaged mix from a big store like this would be good. And lastly, we have some sphagnum moss. This you can buy for like terrariums and reptile supplies, and it seems to be cheaper than when you buy it from a plant nursery or something. And this bag has lasted me a while, so a $10 bag is going to go really far. So I put a little bark and a lot of sphagnum moss. For me, I'm finding sphagnum moss is kind of good for my Oncidiums. I might put more bark in this mix, but I just kind of mix these up by swapping them back and forth between two little pots. Now I've got my plant. It's covered in some sort of strong bug-killing stuff, so I'll definitely wash my hands and arms and every other part of me after using this. So when I'm putting a packing peanut, I just like to put it in the middle. It's like the antithesis of the sphagnum moss ball in the center. This is just going to keep the plant from getting super wet in the middle and rotting its roots, which I'm not worried about, but I'm just going to put a couple right in the center where it has a tendency to stay the wettest. You may say, Astrid, this cup looks so small for this plant. Yeah, it is kind of small, but considering the size of the root system, the size of the plant, I think I can pack this in there and it will fit, and it will be ready to repot by next year when these growths get big. So, what direction to repot? You see this side? You see there's 3 new growths here that I've shown you. So we're gonna put this guy right in here. Twisting kind of helps you to not break roots as much. Now I'm just going to take media, and I personally do like to stuff it down in there, so don't cringe, other orchid growers. This is just how I do. Alright, so I'm making sure it's getting all around the sides, and even though we're holding it this way so these new growths have the most possible room to grow and fill the space, I'm still going to make sure I put some media back here so these roots back here stay hydrated. And you know, just a little bit to kind of get all these roots covered. You say, Astrid, where did you get this cup? Well, it's just a plain old clear solo cup, and I just got it at a regular store, nothing special, and I took my nail file, my nail drill for my acrylic nails, and I drilled holes in the side. You could do that with power tools, hot nail, whatever works for you for making holes in the side, but it's like extremely cheap to make good orchid pots this way, and I'm totally down with extremely cheap things. So yeah, you may be cringing at me pushing these roots down, but I swear to God, I like to repot this way. I like to smash it in, and it goes fine. If you're a little more worried about it, you can repot in a much gentler way. I'm just a little bit pushy, literally. So now we're going to look all around the sides. We've got kind of media all around. We're going to make sure the plant doesn't dry out too badly. This little spot may have some trouble, but it's going to stay wet on the bottom anyway, just a bit. You're going to probably want to keep this in a clay pot so it doesn't tip over, because it's going to be heavy and want to tip over. Before I go, one thing you may say to yourself is, do I water this orchid now that I just repotted it? Personally, because this was totally dehydrated to death, and because I like to repot, I like to water after repot, I do. Some people say it will give your plant an infection, blah blah. I think that's BS. I want to water this, so I'm going to definitely water this. And finally, the very lastest thing I want to do is take this skewer. Normally I'd cut it short, but I don't have time because I want to cut this short. Take this skewer and just put it down diagonally toward the center of the media. Now, I pull this out every morning. I touch it to my wrist and I see if it's wet. If it's still wet, I don't water. If it's approaching dryness or totally dry, depending on the orchid, then I will water. So that's a good way for you to know what time you need to water and if the center of your pot is still wet, because I never know when the center of my pot is still going to be wet, even if the sides look dry. So yeah, there you go. Thanks so much for watching. Maybe you can try to rescue an orchid too. It can be frustrating, but it can also be rewarding. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks so much for joining me in orchidy love. Okay, bye guys.